Recently, I've been playing a ton of Final Fantasy XIV, and even though I'm falling in love with this game, there's still one aspect that I'm really struggling with. Namely, finding groups of like-minded players who I can go on dungeons and raids with. And so I thought today, or maybe I didn't think because this is Thoughtless Designs, that today we could create a logo for a social app that allows players to find party members and friends within MMORPGs easily. This will let me create something fun and engaging while taking you guys through my brand design process. So without further ado, let's get to designing. Okay guys, so we're here in Adobe Illustrator, and as you can see I've already created a mood board for the brand. So my idea behind this was we could have a retro feel with a lot of movement, and I could create this using like these retro typefaces, but also integrating movement with the sharp jagged lines. And you find often that MMO players have been playing these games for a long time, and so that's why I decided to go down the retro route. In these games, players are often casting a lot of spells, slashing a lot of swords, and that's why I decided to incorporate these funky moving elements, because I thought that perfectly reflects the action of the games. And MMOs or RPGs often come with classes, which is basically just the type of character that you play as. So there's usually some kind of magic wielder or healer, some kind of melee attacker like a knight or a warrior, and also a ranged attacker like an archer. As for the colours, I kind of wanted them to be bright and vibrant while also tying into the colours that you might associate with each of the characters. The colours aren't final and they are subject to change, and they often do change just for readability and accessibility purposes. So now that I've guided you through my lovely mood board, the first step I like to do is find a font that matches the style of the mood board, and so that's what we're going to do now. So I've just scoured Google Fonts and Adobe Fonts, and I've whittled the choices of the fonts down to 6 contenders. And what I like to do from here is basically just trust my gut while using the mood board as a rough guide on how the font should feel. And so we're going to eliminate each font one by one until we're left with just one that fits the mood board perfectly. Now there's no right or wrong answer here. If your gut tells you to lean towards a specific font, then do it, because I feel like if you've got that vision with that font, then you can often make it a reality. Now a general tip here is not to stray too far from the vision of the mood board, but if you're feeling adventurous, you can go with a font that you didn't originally envision, and that quite often can lead to some unexpected and quite creative results. So, you know, just go with whatever feels right for you, and I'm sure it will work out. So let's start eliminating these fonts. Right, I think the first one to go has to be probably this one, because this one's quite thin. It's not as blocky as I would like, and it's not really a sans serif font. It's got some like extrusions here, so I don't think this will be a perfect contender. And then that leaves us with 5, so which one do I want to get rid of next? I think, oh, I'm not sure. I think maybe we'll get rid of this one, because this one has some rounded edges and I don't think it really fits the edgy vibe that I'm trying to go for. So I'll get rid of that one. Then let's see here. I think these two have to go as well. I think this one's a bit too cutesy and doesn't have the movement that I want. So I'm going to get rid of that one. And as for this one, I just think the letters are a bit too thin. I want a more of a big, bold, blocky vibe. So I'm going to get rid of this one. And then that leaves us with these two here. Now for this one, I do like how bold and blocky it is, but I don't think it's got the movement that I want to have with this logo. So that means I'm going to lean more towards this one. This one's got a lot of movement, but the thickness is just a tiny bit less than what I would like. Oh, tough choice, tough choice. Which one do I get rid of? I'm seeing more of a vision with this one of what I can do. So I think I'm going to get rid of this one. Oh, tough choice, but it has to go. So now that I've selected my font, the next thing that I like to do is use Illustrator's tools to customize some of the letters. That way it makes the logo type unique and makes it stand out from the rest of its competitors. And also just avoid you having a logo that's just a font, as anyone can just type that out and then it will be copied. And in case you haven't noticed, the company name that I come up with is Radar. I'm quite proud of myself on this one actually, because it's like a radar to find raids. Hey, yeah, get it? So to start customizing the font, what you want to do is go up to Object, and then you want to go to Expand and click OK. And then what this does is it just vectorizes the letters so you can't type anymore, but it lets you customize the letters using Illustrator's tool suite. So my initial idea, I think, is that I want the R to be like a bolt of lightning that comes underneath and kind of underlines the rest of the logo. And then also turning the I into something that resembles the mage's staff. So I'm thinking more jagged with like more of an orb kind of up top rather than just a dot. I feel like that would tie in quite nicely. But first what I'm going to do is just right click and ungroup all the letters. That way like each letter can be moved about and edited individually rather than as a group. So for this part of the video, I am going to just start designing and I'm going to provide commentary over the top just because I find it quite hard to design and give live commentary at the same time. But I'll run you through the process and what tools I've used to create what I did. So to start with the logo, I just used the anchor point tool to grab the bottom anchor points of the leg of the R. And then I just used the pen tool to create a zigzag shape that went all the way across the logo type underneath it. And then because the stroke was too thin, I just upped the stroke so it was roughly just the same size as the thickness of the R. I then expanded the stroke and used the shape builder tool to remove the parts of the zigzag that were overlapping with the R. And I did this just by holding down Alt and then you just drag your mouse over the parts that you want to delete. And some of you might be wondering why I'm just designing in black and white at the minute. There's a very good reason for that. It's so that you know that the logo is going to work in black and white before you add color. So then the logo would work with black and white printers, but also other applications that you may need black and white for. So after I finished the lightning bolt underline, I then moved on to customizing the eye in Radar. So I wanted this eye to represent a staff or a magic wand that a mage would use in an MMO. And as you can see from the footage, I created many different variations. One of the hardest things with this was making the stem of the eye, which would be the handle of the staff. I tried many different zigzag shapes, most of which didn't really fit, so I tried to kind of angle them up so that it followed the direction of the other letters, and that kind of seemed to work. And then the dot on the eye was meant to represent the crystal at the top of the staff. And as you can see, I tried many different shapes. I tried squares, diamonds, triangles, none of which really seemed to work, but I was trying to avoid using a circle. However, the circle in the end was the thing that fit the best. But I needed to add something extra to it to show that it was magical at the top. So what I ended up doing was outlining it with some shapes to show that radiating magical energy from the tip of the staff. And these came in the form of a zigzag shape and like a quarter circle. And I thought this worked quite well because it framed the circle within it. It also made the staff look like it was casting some sort of fireball or meteor spell, which I thought was really sick. But in the end, the I was the only letter that I really customized. I did think about changing some of the other letters to represent some of the other characters, but I thought that would be too much customization. It's always good to know when you should not customize something, because if you customize everything, it can look very messy and you can lose some readability. So guys, we are back. I did land on a concept that I'm happy with. So I'm using the eye as kind of like the wand that a mage would use, and then also just extending the leg of the R to go underneath the rest of the logo type. I think I did a pretty good job of turning the eye into a magic wand. I'm really happy with it and I think it looks really cool. But I did make 3 variations and I'm trying my best to decide on which one I should move forward with. For the top one, I do like all of the small elements around it, but I think it's just a bit too much and I feel like some of the detail might get a bit lost. So I think we're not going to use this one. For the bottom one, I like that it connects up and creates almost like a semicircle. But I feel like the lack of a gap kind of just takes away from the movement of it. So I don't think we're going to go ahead with this one. And instead, I think we're going to go through with using this one. As you can still tell what it is on the top, kind of like a fireball or a meteor. Still feel like it gets that message across. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and move forward with the middle one. So the next thing I want to do is add color. And with color, I want to then add a drop shadow to the logo and see how that looks. And then I also want to try creating some sharp edges that come out of the drop shadow because I'm particularly inspired by this text here and also this image here. So let's crack on with that. So there's not a lot to talk about with the colors really. They all work well together, which I was quite surprised by. Even though they all are bright colors, there's still a lot of contrast with them when the logo is placed on a different colored background. I was really worried about putting the green onto the blue, but in the end, I think it looks like one of the best variations. Other than just adding color, I did give the logo a 3D effect, and I did this by using the blend tool. I made sure that every element of my logo was grouped together, copied it and pasted it in place, and then dragged a duplicate to the side of it by holding Alt. Selecting both of them together, I then clicked on the blend tool and clicked on both of the selections, which created a blend between both of them. And then I double clicked on the blend tool and went to specified steps and changed that to around 50. And then I changed the color of the blend to the black that I was using, and then pressed Ctrl and left bracket until the blend was behind the original logo. And that created this nice 3D effect. Okay, so the colors are now done, and I think this is looking really, really beautiful. I'm really enjoying the contrast between the bold neon colors. And while I was doing that, I also just took the liberty of creating a little icon out of the wand. Just another variation of the logo so it can fit into different sort of spaces, different platforms, etc. I did also try and think of a way to make a stacked variation of this logo so it would be more vertical. But I couldn't come up with any ideas, so I just kind of made the icon instead. And now the next portion of the video, what I want to do is I want to create characters based off of the ones in the mood board, but also blend them with these line styles to make some characters that really fit in with the aesthetic of the brand. And then with those characters, I'm going to turn them into a pattern. That way we can inject some personality into the brand, but also have something practical that could be used as like a social media banner. So let's move on with that part. So now on to the illustrations. As you know, I wanted a mage, a warrior, and a rogue or archer. These illustrations took me forever to do, so much so that it then bled into the next day, which is not ideal. But if you want something done correctly, then you need to put some time and effort into it. And I was really happy with the end result. To create the characters, I used a bunch of different tools, and I really just tried to use my sense of perspective to add life to the characters. I probably went about this in the completely wrong way, and there will definitely be a better solution for creating perspective characters like this. So let's talk about the mage character first. I just used a black circle for his head, and then I stretched out another circle to create the brim of the hat. I just tilted it so it was in the perspective that I needed it to be. Then to create the cone of the hat, I just used two triangles, one big one that goes up the middle, and then I just angled a different one and merged them together to create the point. For the ribbon of the hat, I don't know whether that's correct. I don't know what this part of the hat would be. But I just used the pen tool to eyeball it, and then I used the shape builder tool to delete the parts that were overlapping the rest of the hat. And then for the little highlights and the shadows on the hat, I just used the draw inside function, and then just used different shapes in the pencil tool to create these little highlights and little shadows. I also used the pen tool to create little creases in the hat and little folds in the edge of the brim, and then just used the stroke width tool to alter the sizes of those slightly just to give it more life and character. So moving on to the knight, again I just used a circle for the head, and this perspective was a little bit tricky to get right. I looked up pictures of knights on Google just to help me get the perspective correct. There's no shame in doing this if you need a reference, or even if you want to trace it and then alter it later. Using images as a reference can be a great tool to help you get the desired effect that you want, so don't shy away from it even if you're struggling. After I got the perspective of the knight's visor down, I moved on to designing the feathers that come out the back of the knight's helmet, and I just used the same techniques as the mage's hat to give it those highlights and shadows and also the creases in the feathers, all the while trying to keep that sharp angular style that we're looking for that was shown in the mood board. And next we'll move on to the archer character. This one was like the worst thing to do. Oh my god, I cannot tell you how much I suffered designing this. Because of the way that a traditional archer's hat is, I found it really hard to get the correct perspective. But again, I just looked up pictures of archer's hats on Google, and that really helped clear the vision in my mind of what I wanted to achieve. So to create the archer's hat, I used 3 different triangles, just using the anchor point tool to adjust them where necessary for perspective. And then to create the feather, I just drew an angled line, used the stroke width tool to adjust the variation, and then I expanded that and added a stroke to it, and it turned out really cool. The archer's still using the same techniques as I used for the mage and the knight, so he's got the highlights and the shadows on him using the draw inside function. And then the archer went through many different iterations on the eyes, because I felt that the circular eyes didn't really suit him that well, and I wanted him to be like cheeky and quite devilish. So I tried with triangle eyes and adding gradients, and it didn't really work. But in the end, he kept the triangle eyes, but the selling point was the mask that I designed for him. I did this by just offsetting the stroke on his eyes, and then just expanding that stroke, making it green, and then adding a stroke to that. And for the final touches, I just gave him a little mouth. I just drew it with the pen tool and then used the stroke width tool and held Alt to drag just one side of the stroke down. Then I expanded that stroke and drew a tongue in the mouth by using the draw inside tool. And honestly, for the amount of time that I spent on this, I feel like the outcome was better than expected, and I'm really happy with the final result. Okay, we are back and I've designed the characters. They took way longer than expected to make. Oh my god. Ugh. So we've got the knight here, and then we've got the mage, and then we've got the archer or the bard. I tried to incorporate the jagged edges that were in the mood board onto the accents of the characters. So you've got like the mask of the knight and the feather, the hat of the mage, and the feather and mask of the archer. So now we can use these characters and put them into a repeating pattern. So before I created the pattern, I wanted to create some extra elements to help supplement the characters, because the characters alone in the pattern would have been too boring and too bland. So I took a bit of inspiration from the mood board and created some hard jagged shapes, using many of the techniques that I'd used to create the characters just to help with consistency. For the green and blue shapes, I just used the pen tool to create an irregular shape, and then I just outlined the stroke and gave a stroke to that, and then added in a few triangles here and there just to give it some more sharpness and add some extra variety. And then for the purple and orange shapes, I just used the pen tool to create some really sharp edges and then just closed the shape up, so that it created these shapes that almost look like lightning bolts, which invoke the same kind of movement and energy that I want from the brand. After I created these shapes, it was then time to make the pattern. So to make a pattern, all you have to do is have all of the objects selected that you want within it, then go to Object, Pattern, Make, and it will bring up the pattern options. So from here you can click on any element within the bounding box to move it around. You can even resize it, duplicate it, and all of that. And anything outside the bounding box will show you what the pattern will look like when it's repeated. Some general tips here that I like to use. I like to move some of my elements to the corners. Because it's a repeating pattern, it will still appear on the other side, but moving things into corners will allow you to fill up the other space with other elements. A general tip here is to not leave too much white space, but also don't over clutter the canvas. Too much white space will make your pattern feel empty, and too many elements will make your pattern feel cluttered. It's all about finding the right balance. If you find you've got too little elements to fill the space effectively, what you can do is just duplicate some elements, resize them, rotate them, just to give it some more variety and some more intrigue. So I did exactly this. I was resizing my characters, resizing the different elements, duplicating them, rotating them, and resizing them, just to give it that extra edge. And then once you're done with your pattern, all you've got to do is press escape and Illustrator will add it to the swatches panel. So guys, now that the pattern is created, all you have to do is click on the pattern in the swatches panel and then grab one of your shapes here. And then when we pull it out, look at that, we've got a lovely pattern right here. Now the last thing to do is put all of this onto some beautiful mock-ups and then showcase it. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, here's Radar. Thank you guys so much for sticking around till the end of the video. If you enjoyed the content, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you want to see more brand design videos from me, you can check out these videos here. And with that, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!